Hello and welcome to the latest in my constructed video series. This is Brian Kibler with StarCityGames.com, and as you can see on your screen, today we're going to be playing some Standard. This is pretty much the deck that I played at the Pro Tour, green-white aggro. I've made a couple of modifications from that deck based on the metagame at the Pro Tour and what I sort of expect to see moving on, but we'll get to that in a moment. So obviously this is a green-white aggro deck. It's very, very similar to the deck that won the Star City Games Open Series the weekend before the Pro Tour. And I think it's just a solid deck. You have a lot of just really efficient and really high quality threats. You have 10 1-drops. Both Soldier and Experiment 1 are just really, really efficient threats that can be difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. Soldier in particular is great in the mirror match and against a lot of decks that might have things like Burning Emissary, Rakdos Cackler. There's just a lot of multicolor creatures that it can attack through and hold off. And Experiment 1 can obviously be a pretty huge creature when you evolve it over the course of the game. Sunblade Elf is also pretty excellent as a threat later on, but it's the weakest, I think, of the three, which is why there's only 2 copies of it. It also relies on having actual planes in play, which can sometimes be troublesome. One of the toughest parts about this deck is actually the mana. You have 4 copies of Mana Confluence, just because you really need to actually have both colors early in order to cast your spells on time. I think the biggest reason that green-white wasn't particularly successful through most of the previous year of Standard is because there wasn't effective mana for it. I've bemoaned the state of mana for aggressive decks for a long time, particularly given that the monocolor decks have Mutavault, the 2-color decks that want to actually play the cool cards from Ravnica block like Voice of Resurgence and Selesnya Charm and Lotleth Troll and things like that just don't have the mana to operate. Finally, we had Mana Confluence, so now we can actually do things. The 2-drops obviously great. Voice and Fleecebane Lion are just super efficient and provide a lot of disruptive elements. Fleecebane Lion's ability to go monstrous is really really sweet in certain matchups, whereas Voice's ability to sort of win attrition fights is one of the most important things about the deck against a deck like Mono Black, for instance. One of the really key cards in the deck, though, is Ajani. So a lot of the versions that I have seen of this deck over time only have 1 or 2 copies of Ajani. I'd almost play 4 of them, but the fact that it is a Planeswalker that is legendary effectively means that you don't want to have to just be flooded with them. It's also not at its best in some matchups, but it is it's still just a really powerful card, and just the ability to sort of blow your opponent up. One of the matchups which a lot of people purported was a bad matchup for this deck when I was playtesting it, and one of the reasons other people in the team didn't really want to play it was because of decks like Green Devotion, where they just sort of go bigger than you, and they're able to gum up the ground and your little creatures can't get through. But the number of people who I just killed by jumping something with Ajani, and frequently jumping something bestowed with Boon Satyr with Ajani and just killing them in a single hit, it's pretty crazy. So Ajani is a huge deal. I only have 2 copies of Banishing Light because I want the most possible proactive cards in the deck. If you look at the deck, everything's a creature, a land, or in the case of Ajani, a Planeswalker, except for Banishing Light. Everything is able to be proactive. Even Selesnya Charm, one of the reactive cards in the deck, is able to be a threat when you need it to. And one of the really important things about a deck like this is the ability to continue to apply pressure. And that's one of the, Selesnya Charm is one of the best cards in the deck. It's perhaps the most important card in your deck in a lot of cases, because it allows you to have removal for key cards like Desecration Demon. It can provide a combat trick, but it also can just be that instant 2/2 creature, which is just really important, to be the ability to keep pressure on and not just be sitting with dead cards in your hand, as your opponent is sort of taking control as the game goes on. So only 3 copies of Advent, because one of the ways this deck can quite easily lose is just getting stuck with uncastable cards. You want to be able to curve out and be able to actually put a lot of pressure on your opponent. That's really what this deck is about applying and continuing to put pressure on them. And Advent is a great threat that allows you to circumvent sorcery speed removal, wrath effects, but is a forecasting cost spell in a deck without mana creatures and with a lot of reliance on coming out of the gates quickly. So 3 copies of that. Sideboard-wise, the most important sideboard card is this one, Citizen Tactics. I extolled the virtues of this card in my article about the Pro Tour, and as well as in my video log series, which you should check out if you haven't already. But this card is just phenomenal. It gives you the ability to just wipe out your opponent's board against decks like Mono Blue or again Green Devotion. A lot of decks, you know, where games are sort of going to slow down and gum up, and they don't really have a lot of removal. Tactics can just wipe them out completely, and it's pretty incredible. The one big difference in this deck compared to my old deck is Ajani's Presence. I played 2 copies of God's Willing and 2 copies of Back to Nature in the sideboard there. With Ivan Flux win at the Pro Tour, I anticipate Supreme Verdict, Planar Cleansing versions of blue-white to be more popular than the Detention Sphere versions. So Back to Nature loses a lot of value, and Ajani's Presence gains a lot of value when compared to God's Willing. So you get a little marginal downgrade against black decks because God's Willing is better there, but Ajani's Presence is substantially stronger against Supreme Verdict and Planar Cleansing versions of blue-white. Skylasher obviously against Mono Blue, Hunt the Hunter, a great tool in the Mirror or against Green Devotion decks, and also the Planeswalker decks that have a bunch of mana creatures. This can be quite powerful as well. Ajani Steadfast is basically just I think a better Armadillo Cloak, Unflinching Courage, in terms of giving you the ability, a lot of flexibility and the resistance to something like Chain to the Rocks with your actual lifelink creature. And then Mentor of Heroes is great in the attrition matchups against things like black, where they'll be just trading with your guys, removal for guy, and then if you can actually just play big Ajani, it's a Ajani theme deck here. I got all of them that are legal anyway, and you'll just be able to take over the game, and also just can have an immediate board impact by making your creatures bigger. So anyway, that's the deck we're going to be playing, and I think it's a very strong deck. We're actually playing in a daily today rather than any of the 8-player events because, well, I'm actually home for a weekend, and there's a daily starting very soon. So we're going to jump into that and see how it goes. So let's do it.